Hi everyone. In this video, I want to talk about why politics isn't everything. Now, I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive. One, because right now we're living in such polarized times, it really does seem like politics is everything. It is everywhere and it defines all aspects of our lives, and it just seems like politics is everything right now. I'm actually going to make an argument for why it's important for us to remember that politics isn't actually everything. I know it's also counterintuitive because I study political science for a living, and here I am making a video about why politics isn't everything. I actually told that to my class the day after the election, too. Class full of 40 political science majors. And I come in and say, political science majors, let me tell you something. Politics isn't actually everything. So it's really important. So basically, because when we get to the point where we probably are already there right now, as I just said, where we think that politics is everything, that can lead to extreme polarization in society. And that's just one teeny tiny little step away from political violence. And we've already seen a bit of it in recent years. And so, and everybody's all worried about this era of polarization. How can we stop it? Why is it happening? One reason why I think it's happening is because we have all forgotten that politics isn't actually everything. So in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about why it's important to hold on to apolitical truths, because some truths are apolitical. That meaning they exist outside the realm of politics, meaning just that they're true no matter who is in power, no matter what party is in the White House, or no matter how powerful, if you're living under a totalitarian regime, no matter how powerful that totalitarian regime, there are some truths that are beyond the reach of the political powers that be, no matter how powerful they are. And it's really, really, really important that we remember that such things exist. Okay, so I hope this video will be helpful, and I will tell you more in the next slide. So the reason I think that this is important to remember that politics isn't actually everything is for this reason. Right now, I know that sounds like a very kind of idealistic, naive statement to make, because right now it really feels like politics is everything. And that's because we're living in a very polarized age right now. I also maybe feel it a little bit more because, like I said, political science is the field that I study. So, of course, it sounds strange for me to say, I'm going to make a video about how politics isn't everything. So the reason why I say that is just because we are living in such a political polarized society. It sounds weird for us to say, consider such an idea that politics isn't actually everything. And I'm also saying that the problem is when we think that politics is everything, that itself is what leads to a very polarized society. And that's very dangerous because, of course, it can lead to political violence. So it's really healthy, I think, for any society to have strong institutions, by which I mean like groups, civic groups, things that are outside of the political realm. Those are really important parts of society for any healthy, I think, democracy. A totalitarian regime, of course, it's the totalitarian regime, everything is political, they control everything. That's the meaning of totalitarian, right? But if we're talking about a democratic society, or at least a society that aims to be democratic or purports to be democratic, the non-political or the apolitical is really, really important. So in this video, I'm going to talk about what are the sorts of things that exist outside of the political realm, and why it's important to kind of hold on to those things, because if we don't, it can lead us to some very bad places. So in previous videos, I've talked a lot about Hannah Arendt's 1967 essay, Politics and Truth. It's available for free online from the New Yorker magazine if you just search in, Politics and Truth. I assigned it to my class this semester, of course, because this is like a seminal essay from the mid-20th century by one of the greatest political philosophers of all time, Hannah Arendt. who escaped the Nazis twice, by the way. She was a Jewish refugee, eventually made her way over to the United States and became part of this sort of cadre of intellectuals that survived various totalitarian regimes, such as Nazi Germany, and came to the United States. And they all have kind of a link in that they experienced firsthand what life under a totalitarian regime was like. And I think in various ways they all spent their careers trying to warn us of the dangers of those things. And by the way, people I'm thinking about in this cadre, Hannah Arendt, Hans Morgenthau, even Henry Kissinger was one. Karl Popper was another. There's more. These are just the names that are coming to mind right now. We could even, Judith Sklar, I forget where she's from, but she might be another one. We could think of these people, and I have heard them called Cold War liberals. Liberals with a lowercase l, meaning not that they were of the Democratic Party, but that they were liberal in the sense of the Enlightenment era tradition of lowercase l liberalism. The belief that, economic ties is helpful for reducing the potential of violence in the world, that individuals have certain rights, that, there's civic and political rights for the individual, that it's important to ensure that those remain against any political government that tries to take those away. That kind of small L liberalism is what I'm talking about. So some people call that group, that cadre of people, of mid-20th century people, Cold War liberals. And the reason for that is because they were, of course, living during the Cold War, where you had the US on one side and the USSR on the other side. But also they were people who had experienced totalitarian regimes on both the right and the left. So they'd survived Nazi Germany or Stalin's Russia, or had Mussolini's Italy, for example, or lived under Franco in Spain. So these were a group of people who really understood that the danger of totalitarianism doesn't just come from one side of the political spectrum. It can come from either side. And I think that's really important to remember right now. For us right now, we're experiencing a lot of that threat of totalitarianism coming from the right. But there are totalitarian regimes on the left, such as Maduro in Venezuela, a couple of other ones. But overwhelmingly, I think the populism that we're seeing around the world today, with its roots in ethnic nationalism, and let's see, like Christian nationalism is another way to describe it. Those kinds of roots where they believe that only a certain ethnic group has a right to live on a certain territory, for example, that immigrants are bad, they demonize immigrants a lot, stuff like that. Kind of nativist populism, for example, is really what we're seeing a lot, not only in the US, but all around the world right now. And that tends to lead to, of course, strongman rule and totalitarian politics. So that's why I thought it was important to make this video about the importance of the non-political or the apolitical, because when everything is seen as political, that's when polarization happens and political violence can result, and terrible atrocities have been the result of such situations in previous times. And of course, I, like many other people, I'm worried that we're heading in that direction today already, if we're not already there. So the importance of political, of the non-political, lies in the reason I cite Hannah Arendt's article so often is because she makes this distinction really clear, that there are multiple kinds of truth, right? So we often just say truth, as a singular thing, and think that all truth is one kind of truth, right? But it's not. There are multiple different kinds of truths. For example, there are rational and mathematical truths, such as 2 + 2 = 4, or, a square is, 4 right angles of equal sides. That's the definition of a square. That's a rational kind of truth, right? And then Arendt says there's also philosophical and moral truths, such as, when Socrates says that it's better to suffer injustice than to do injustice. That's a philosophical or a moral truth. or beliefs. Sometimes religious beliefs can go into this category as well. These kinds of religious truths, such as the Sermon on the Mount, stuff like that. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That kind of thing, treating people fairly and justly. Those are religious, moral, or philosophical truths, right? And then finally she says, and then there is factual truth, which is the basis for all political activity. Factual truths are things like this event happened on this day in history. It's important to remember, though, that facts are always interpreted, and that interpretation is never apolitical or objective. It is contextual. That is, it is a product of its time and place. Okay, so I've made other videos, so I'm not going to go into about her article and her argument elsewhere on my YouTube channel. You can find them below. So I'm not going to go into that too much here, but I just wanted to open this video about the apolitical with her distinction of these different multiple kinds of truths, because she says that factual truths are actually just like rational truths in that they exist outside of the political realm. What does that mean? That means that 2 + 2 = 4, no matter how powerful the political regime is, they cannot make 2 + 2 = 5, right? These kinds of truths are rational. They're also universal. 2 + 2 = 4, no matter what country you're in, or no matter what time period you're living in. That's it's a universal kind of truth that exists outside of the realm of politics, outside of the realm of human activity. And Arendt says that factual truths, facts, let's just say facts, exist there also. Now here's an important caveat, though. They exist out there, but facts always have to be put into a narrative and given meaning. And once that process happens, that's where they can become political. That's where politics steps in. And we have this idea in our own time, our own understanding of truth is that for most academics, and I think this has been misunderstood a lot, but that process is never objective. There is no objective, neutral way to interpret a fact. Once you put that fact into a narrative, that's when it becomes political, and your narrative is very contextual, meaning it's very influenced by the time and place that you're living in. So a fact, to me, the fact of Columbus's crossing the Atlantic means something very different for me than it did for Columbus. And it meant something very different for Columbus and his patrons back in the old world than it did for the people who were already living here in the new world when he came over, right? So a fact, the fact of Columbus crossing the Atlantic, what that fact meant to different people in different times and different places changes, right? So the quote unquote postmodern, I've said, in the previous, I hate using that term, but if we want to consider ourselves as living in kind of the postmodern era, and by the way, I mean meaning the period after modernity. In political science, modernity starts way back in like the 16th century with like Machiavelli in the late 1500s, right? Hobbes writing in the 17th century, about 1650, he writes the Leviathan. In political theory and political philosophy, we consider that the beginning of the modern period as contrasted to the ancient period. So the only reason why I like the term postmodern is because we have different ideas now that are slightly different from the moderns, but we still kind of live in the modern period. Anyway, by that I mean, by postmodern, I just mean like the 20th and 21st centuries, basically our own times. So it's a kind of postmodern or a contemporaneous idea right now. It's an understanding of truth that's pretty well accepted across the board, that those interpretations of facts are never neutral and never objective. And the reason why I say that this has been misunderstood lately is because in the political arena recently, some people have taken that to mean that there is no such thing as objective factual truth at all. And that is not what that means. So in the class that I'm teaching right now, for example, Democracy and Propaganda, we read an article from 2022, just a couple of years ago, that is all about how that term post-factual, that to describe the era that we live in, that's really a misnomer. and it's based on an incorrect conclusion from a correct assumption. The correct assumption being that there is no neutral, objective interpretation of facts. The incorrect conclusion being that therefore there is no objective factual truth at all. So I really love that article because I think it's the most clear, articulate explanation for what's happening today and why people are actually seem to be giving credence to this idea that there is no truth, that the truth is whatever you think it is. My truth can be different from your truth. That's true, but only in that objective, interpretive sense, not in the sense of facts. Facts, Arendt says, they do exist outside of that political realm. And her classic example is, in August 1914, Germany invaded Belgium, right? That's a fact. That's a thing that happened. It's a thing that exists. And sometimes unwelcome facts can cause the political regime in power to try to suppress them. And her example of that is that during Stalin's Russia, they tried to suppress the existence of Leon Trotsky, right? They tried to write him out of the history books. Ultimately, they were unsuccessful. And so that leads Arendt to conclude that factual truths, just like rational truths, exist outside of the political realm and are therefore beyond the reach of any political regime, no matter how powerful it is. Facts are stubborn things. They persist. They are resilient, she says. So ultimately, another reason why I love this article is because it is so optimistic like that. And I think it's a really important thing for us to understand right now when we have people who are claiming to believe in what Kellyanne Conway calls alternative facts, right? Such as Donald Trump won the 2020 election. Obviously, that's a lie, the opposite of a fact. The opposite of a truth is lying, not opinion, but lying. Or if one wanted to say that he lost the 2024 election, that would be a lie, right? So the other kind of truth that I think is apolitical is moral or religious or philosophical truths, right? I said what those are earlier in this video, but the idea about how we should conduct ourselves, our ethical basis, our own morality, right? That's apolitical because it doesn't change, or at least it shouldn't change, depending on who is in power, right? If you believe killing is wrong, then killing is wrong whether it's Democrat in power or Republicans in power in the United States, for example. That's why I say that philosophical or moral truths are also apolitical, because they also exist outside of the political realm, meaning they exist no matter, they are true. If they're true no matter what the political situation is, right? So philosophical and moral truths are also apolitical. So facts matter. They form the basis of political life. As Hannah Arendt says, they are the sky that stretches above us and the ground beneath our feet. And that's just a very hopeful reminder for us to carry forth, I think, as we go through the next 4 years under the political administration of a man who seems to lie just constantly. When the state engages in what Hannah Arendt calls organized lying, by which she meant, the example of Stalin's Russia, in other words, propaganda, it can be very unsettling. I wouldn't call what we see with Donald Trump organized lying, because Donald Trump is just simply not that organized, and he's just one person. It's not. I think it's different from the organized lying from a totalitarian regime like Stalin's Russia. I think it's a little bit different. They're still dangerous. It's still an attempt to get people to believe in alternative realities, such as, alternative facts. And that's still dangerous. It's very dangerous to democracy. It's dangerous also to our sense of basic reality. It feels like being gaslit, right? Because you are being gaslit. You're basically being told that what you're seeing is not true. And her other example is in Nazi Germany, for example, the existence of the concentration camps. It was something that was never acknowledged by the state, yet everybody knew them to exist. People lived in them, they worked in them, they died in them. So that's the kind of disorienting, 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 experience that happens when you have the official line of the state is that something that everybody knows is true is not true, or vice versa. Something that everybody knows is not true is true. So that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. So I hope you found this little video helpful. Once again, my name is Barbara Howe. I'm a PhD candidate in politics and international affairs, and my areas of specialization are democracy and propaganda.